Ja, als je stapt terug doet, zei je wel.
En die kan ik zo weg. Hè?
Goedemorgen. Wat zie jij nu dan?
Ja.
Wou die ook even zo. Deze manier. In ieder geval iets. Ja?
Ja.
Heb jij de andere? Zeg maar even welkom. Welkom everybody. Good morning, everybody. Slight delay, but we are going to start now. I'm here with Franc Buve for the first session of the second day of the Plugfest site program. We'll be talking about OCPP support for battery swapping. Frank, floor is yours.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are. Today, I'd like to discuss something new that's happening in the market. We are seeing the upcoming of battery swapping. And I would like to talk you through what this might mean for OCPP. So basically 3 topics for today: the whole concept of battery swapping, what it is, what it would mean in OCPP messages, and what kind of support we could provide in OCPP for this. First, the whole concept of battery swapping. We see that it is already fairly common in Asia to use battery swapping for 3-wheelers and 2-wheelers, the famous tuk-tuks or rickshaws. But for cars, it's less common. I mean, it does exist. We have, for example, the NIO battery swap stations, but we don't see it as often as we now see it for 3-wheelers. So I first like to dive in on the battery swapping for cars. I'm specifically using cars here because EV is more general concept, and a 3-wheeler would also be an EV. Yeah? So talking about battery swapping for cars, it has not been very popular. I mean, we had Better Place in Europe who tried to do that, but they stopped doing this in 2013 because it never really took up. They did it together with Renault. Tesla did a pilot for it in 2013, but Tesla decided not to continue it because they want to focus on really fast charging. According to Tesla, battery swapping would have, might pose too many technical problems, and also they wanted to use the battery eventually as a structural battery, where it's really part of the car, and of course then you cannot swap it anymore. But we see that NIO, for example, is rolling out battery swapping in China and quite successful there. We see also CATL is doing it, and Geely is doing it for e-trucks. So yeah, so there is definitely a movement in that direction. But how come that it is not so popular for electric cars? Well, first, car batteries are not standardized. So every OEM, every car manufacturer has a different type or format of battery. And also the battery performance is often a unique selling point for this OEM. They want to differentiate on that because they don't have a bigger or powerful engine anymore. So they need to do it in that way. Another thing is that there appears to be a lack of consumer interest for battery swapping. And there are several reasons for that. First is the idea of owning versus leasing. If you do battery swapping, you cannot really own the battery. You have to lease the battery. And it turned out that was also the experience with Better Place in the past, that people don't really like to lease the battery of their car. They want to own it. They don't want to have an additional 100 or 200 euros per month to pay for the battery, for example. And also car batteries have a much larger capacity. So you travel longer, you don't need to charge as often as you would, for example, with an electric scooter. And if you travel for 3 hours, then a 15 to 30 minute break to do some fast charging is not that much of an issue. So I think there's some major reasons why for cars it's not that popular. But on the other hand, we see in China that NIO now already has over 1,600 swap stations, and they're also rolling them out in Europe. They have around 26 now in Europe. So it is definitely something that's there. It's not going away. It will have a certain market share in the world for e-cars. On the other hand, for e-scooters and three-wheelers, it appears to be very popular. Why is that? Well, the battery cost is more than half of the cost of an electric scooter. And as you might know, the people driving scooters are not the most wealthy people. So the scooter has to be cheap. So if you can take out the battery, that makes a huge difference. And also the batteries that they use, they are kept smaller because that reduces cost. The battery is one of the most expensive parts. If you have a smaller battery, you have a cheaper scooter. But it means you need to recharge more often. Furthermore, these are small batteries. They don't have any thermal management. So you cannot do any really fast charging because they lack the cooling to do that. So that in turn means that, that you get relatively long charging times. Well, if you have a small battery and you need to recharge often and you have long charging times, that doesn't work. And at the same time, swapping these small batteries is really easy. You can take them out by hand. You don't need mechanized systems. So a battery swap station is also a lot cheaper. And then on top of that, because it started to get popular, we already see that there are standardization efforts to standardize on a single battery type, especially in India. They're really doing a lot of work on that. So this makes, I think, that battery swapping for 2- and 3-wheelers is going to be really big. So OCPP is about charging and controlling charging stations. So if we get battery stations, can we also control them with OCPP, because it is a kind of charging station. So only the problem is that OCPP manages a charging transaction from start to end and tells you how fast it charges, etc. But a battery swap transaction is not about charging itself. A battery swap is actually a service. The service is that you get new battery, and the price is determined by the difference in state of charge between the battery that you put back and the battery that you take out. So it's slightly different, and the actual charging of the battery happens after the fact. So there we have a question, what should be considered a transaction in OCPP? Is the battery swap action going to be the transaction, or are we seeing the charging of the battery as a transaction? Well, there are different approaches here, but I've been in contact with a company who is already doing work on that from Korea, and they told me that they don't use a transaction mechanism for OCPP to support it, because they just see it as a service, as a one-time swap that you can just pay at that point in time. And I think this is probably also the best, because you could start an OCPP transaction, but you say, start transaction, battery in, battery out, stop transaction. It does not add much value. So what would this mean then for the OCPP messages? Well, we have the following events there. The user arrives with his scooter or three-wheeler and presents itself with his charge card. And these can be e-wallets where the money amount is on the card, or it can also be a remote payment system. That doesn't really matter for OCPP. So you get an authorized request basically to know whether the user is allowed to use his battery station. Then the user returns the empty battery pack, and then this would have to be reported to the backend that this happens. And there we need a new kind of message, for example, battery in a message with the slot number where you put the battery in, the ID tag that's associated with it, because you need to pay for it, the state of charge of the existing battery, but also the state of health of the battery, how degraded is the battery, things like that. And a serial number, so you know exactly which battery it is, so that they can track which battery is where. And I know that there are also batteries that have some additional information. For example, if they were dropped or somehow maltreated or overheated, they record that information and that is sent back to the back office, so that the operator knows, okay, did this battery has been maltreated by the last user, for example, or it's I can better take it out of service because we cannot trust it anymore. And that's new kind of information for OCPP. So that will have to be added to such a message so that the back office can record that. Then the swapping station will either tell the user which battery pack to take out, or will give the user an option, or you can take out one of these battery packs, and they might have different states of charge, so you can choose what you need. And again, there the system needs to record all this battery health, state of charge information, and the difference between the old and the new state of charge is then usually the base for the price you pay for the battery swap. And on top of that, in most schemes, you also have a kind of fixed lease. So in order to participate with the battery swap, you have to pay a certain monthly amount, and then you can swap batteries, and you pay the actual energy also that is used. Okay, yeah. When all that is finished, then the system has to recharge the empty battery. And I think at that point, it would be useful to use OCPP transaction events to record the charging. It's no longer useful for the user, but the operator then knows exactly which battery is charging, how fast, how they are doing it. And it might also be interesting, I don't have a slide on that, but I think that might happen in the future. If you have large battery packs with maybe 50 or 100 battery packs in there, you might also use them as a kind of grid support storage. These batteries, while they are there and not being used with V2X capabilities, might be used to support a grid or frequency control, for example, because you're just a stationary battery at that point in time. And then the whole OCPP transaction event mechanism and the V2X support in OCPP 2.1 would be really useful.
Would be the transaction on the serial, not on the
that's a good suggestion from Core here, that if you do a transaction event, because transaction events are normally coupled to an ID tag, but the ID tag is gone because the user is no longer involved with this battery, but you relate it to the serial number of the battery, for example, so that you know exactly which battery you're dealing with. Yeah. So what kind of support could we offer for this in OCPP? At the moment, there are some implementations that are doing it already, but they use OCPP 1.6 and they use a data transfer mechanism. Yeah, but makes sense. But we're now investigating if we can add this support to OCPP 2.1. And it looks now that we need a battery in and a battery out message with the fields that I sketched. And we probably need a device model extension, new components, where you can provide or describe the capabilities of this battery station. But very important, and what I want to ask the audience and everybody listening, if you're implementing something like this, please provide us with input. I mean, we have some ideas already from a party that we've spoken to, but the industry is wider. So let me know what you want for this, and then we'll see if we can add this to 2.1. And with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. And now, so if there are any questions.
Do you have questions?
Maybe something to add.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No, I think it's a good situation, especially for those small 2- 3-wheelers batteries. In the past, I had a similar project, but was also about battery swapping. Only they were 10-foot containers.
Oh.
Batteries, because they were
For
needed
shipping,
for shipping, inland shipping. So sailing from Rotterdam to Duisburg and back. They use 4 of those containers, so that was a bit more of a hassle because they, while the container was charging, it behaved like you explained for the battery, but when it was on a ship, it acted as a station because they want to keep track of how much the ship was consuming of that. So it had to act as, that was a very difficult case, but that's probably something to investigate while doing this. More in general, also look at those bigger use cases where they use 10-foot containers, and the ship used 4 of them to propel them from Rotterdam to the Ruhrgebiet, and then they had to swap them again on deck and then get back. And they also need to have track and trace of those containers, because I see you were having, it's probably not the case here, but track and trace, where's my battery?
Yes, I think this is Lonneke Driessen. We learned from parties in India that's also the case for these 2- and 3-wheelers, that the battery has a tracker. So you know where the battery is, because it's an important component. So you want to keep track of it. Yeah. So that seems that there are similarities between even these smaller battery or big battery containers. But but I'd like to stress the request of Frank. So if there's anybody who knows this or is working on this, please share your thoughts and what you need with the Open Charge Alliance, so we can think of how it should work. So far, but we need really industry experience to make this fit 100% to what's needed.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it. But this was a project I think 4 or 5 years ago, and it did not sail away because of financing, because it was a very expensive project.
Yeah.
But it's still something to remember that these kind of, they're not like, probably have something with planes or with ships or with mining. They get these kind of solutions because they want to swap quickly. Get these kind of solutions.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like the Geely solution for the e-trucks, but you also have like a small crane to lift off a whole battery from the truck. Yeah.
Koos van Heusden. I also had a question regarding it. In this case, you still have a charging station in a sense with which you will communicate with OCPP. Is there also some mechanism needed to keep track of the batteries currently in the station? Because strictly you can just use a ledger of all the ins and outs, but in practice, especially with small batteries, I can imagine that manual non-registered transactions will also still occur. So you need a mechanism maybe to get what batteries are currently in the configuration.
No, you know which batteries are in the configuration, because it's when a battery is inserted, it is reported by the battery in.
Then you need to be sure that it's always on, because if the station loses power and you remove one, then your ledger is no longer accurate.
Yeah, so
it might be good to also get updates.
Storage in the station to maintain this information, or might need some kind of requirement where if the station boots up,
it has a way to
which batteries are in there.
Exactly.
I also mentioned for track and trace, add some Apple Tag or something like that into the battery, so you can track it via different systems.
Yeah, I suppose you could do that.
Yeah,
you only need to make sure that it also has a physical connection with the charging station, especially if you want to use it to help the grid.
Yeah,
you need to know what is in your station.
They might have such a solution, maybe. I don't know how this relates to privacy laws that we have in Europe, for example, but in India that might not be not such an issue. Yeah. Are there any questions online, Martijn?
No, not yet. I don't know. I'm looking at Paul. No, not online as yet. We have some latecomers. Do you have any questions about the battery swap presentation?
Sorry for late, and then we could not see the presentation, but in Korea, especially the battery swap station is to install the many of them, because our government gave some subsidy for this one. That's why our governors are wanted to communicate with the battery swap station with the servers. So my opinion is that we hurry to need to the OCPP the OCPP certification for this one, but our other the companies like as the Tadis are working on the prepare for the OCPP to using the battery swap station. So I think that in might be couple of years are needed for the certification on that, but our governors wanted to the more fastly to making some OCPP certification, because they wanted to how can you install and then how can you the using and the batteries and then the other kinds of that. So yeah, that is just a comment of the, this is the battery station is very wanted to the OCPP certificate.
Yeah, it's good that you
Thank you.
mentioned Tardis, because that's one of the companies that I have been in touch with. Yeah, I hope more companies come forward and let us know what they're doing with swap stations.
Okay. Well, that's it. Thank you, Frank. Thank you everybody here for your questions. Paul, can you end the session?